from Stanton House. Welcome to Cyber Go-to-Market Girl Talk, the go-to podcast for women in cyber. During this series, we will be exploring the background of female go-to-market leaders in cybersecurity vendors. And I'm delighted and honoured to be joined on this series by 7 successful females to hear about how they got to where they are today and the challenges they overcame in doing so. I hope you enjoy the series, and if you would like the opportunity to feature on future seasons, please do get in touch. Thanks for listening. I look forward to sharing each episode with you bi-weekly. I'm delighted to be joined by my third guest, Jessica Stanford, Chief Marketing Officer of Cybersecurity, the provider of the first cloud forensics and incident response platform for enterprise customers. Jessica, welcome. Thank you for joining me on the series. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's awesome.
No, you're very welcome. It's great to have you. And I'd love to hand over to you for the first instance then, just to talk us through your career. So I know that you've had a very progressive career in the cybersphere, and each of your movements has been very intentional to get you to where you are today. So tell me a little bit about that journey.
I think the interesting thing, when I started and got into cyber, everyone that was in cyber around me didn't grow up in cybersecurity because it's a new thing, it's a new industry. And a lot of, everyone has their story. Nowadays, it's a little different. I think coming out of school, there's programs at universities where you can study cybersecurity. So I think it's different nowadays, but for the elders of us in cybersecurity, everyone has their story of how they got into the industry because it didn't exist prior. So my story, I was actually in finance. So I was coming out of undergraduate, I went into finance. I was doing that for a bit out in California and found it completely not challenging. I wanted to be more creative. I wanted to find more of a challenge. I just got bored by doing the same reports, monthly, quarterly, annually. So I went back to school and then eventually landed in marketing, which I knew I wanted to do. And yes, somewhat out of luck, landed in tech. I thought I wanted to do CPG, consumer packaged goods, at first, because I was like, I know I want to shift my job focus into marketing out of finance, but I want to get it into an industry that I can sort of get my hands around. And I kind of tested that. I did an internship. I was actually selling beer, so that was a whole different world. And it was interesting, but again, not the challenge that I was looking for. And I think that's like my lesson is I just love a good challenge, and that's when I'm at home. And when I first got into tech, I took an internship in a tech company and really didn't understand anything. And I was like, oh, okay, this is different. This is hard. This is interesting. And I just wanted to learn everything about it and kind of pivoted into this cybersecurity role at RSA. Like forever, I'm grateful to Karen Levy, who gave me my first opportunity in product marketing. She hired me out of school and taught me everything about cybersecurity and product marketing. And yeah, I've had an amazing career ever since then, but it is kind of, that's my path coming from finance. And I know, Elle, you have the same, so.
Yeah, no, I remember when we first met one another, and when you kind of mentioned that you'd started in the finance world, I was like, oh my goodness, I actually started my recruitment experience in the finance world. And I think I was quite open with you and said that I kind of had 2 paths I could have taken. One could have been in cyber, one could have been in accounting and finance. And I went for finance because I was quite nervous about what the cyber world looked like, and I didn't think that I'd be able to do it. So it's interesting that we've got, similarities in the backgrounds there and the verticals that we've kind of operated in. But yeah, so obviously, I guess each of the movements that you've made, and you mentioned when we last met that you made very intentional decisions with each of the movements, and I guess moving, I think you said relatively quickly to try and get to the level that you are. So tell us a little bit about what your strategy was then with that.
Yeah, so I would say I didn't move quickly at the beginning of my career because there was so much to learn, and within cybersecurity and not having a technical background at all, I knew I had a lot to learn. And so I just felt fortunate to be in a position at a company where I could gain some of that industry knowledge So in my first couple jobs within cybersecurity, that was my focus. It was not climbing a ladder or, getting a bigger title or a bigger position or a big salary. It was more about gaining that experience and that knowledge base.
Yeah.
And, to be totally fair, I don't know that I had my sights set at that time on what I could do long term. I was thinking more short term of just wanting to get my feet wet and totally understand this industry because I fell in
Mhm.
love since my first job in cybersecurity. So that was really my first goal. So I was at RSA. I then moved to CyberArk, which was a little bit smaller company before they went public, um, and got a flavor for what that side of the world looks like. And then I moved. So these were all lateral moves from RSA to CyberArk to Cybereason, all lateral. And again,
Mm.
because I was just trying to get that understanding and get a feel for what it's like at different companies, different size companies, and learn more about the industry. And it wasn't until leaving Cybereason, within Cybereason, I did get a promotion. I was running the product marketing team. And then at that point, leaving Cybereason, I took a bigger jump and kind of did start focusing. I felt like I understood now what I wanted to do. I started wanting more out of the job because I felt like I had really gained a lot of skills in the years that I put in the grunt work kind of, in an individual contributor role. And so I've kind of been climbing the ladder more quickly since then, and going to smaller companies as a result too.
Yeah.
So now here I am at Cato and I'm the CMO. I still kind of like pinch myself sometimes when I think about that or say it out loud. It's still, we can get to imposter syndrome, but um, yeah. So here we are.
I know, no, that's a great journey, and I think that's something important that you've mentioned there is that you weren't opposed to taking those lateral moves between various different cyber organizations to really, I guess, enhance your knowledge of the world that you were immersing yourself in. And I think that, whilst we talk about the fact that you can be in cyber and you don't have to be a hacker, you don't have to, know how to code and all of those things. I think to get to the level that you're at now, it is important that you still do immerse yourself in the world around you, and you do have a solid understanding. No one's saying no that you have to have that right off the bat. As long as you've got that curiosity to learn and you're willing to kind of be a sponge and absorb learning from all different walks of life, then you can absolutely get there. But taking those lateral moves has really helped you as well, it seems.
Absolutely. I think it's the reason why I've been so successful and my career has advanced rather quickly in the last few years because I was able to kind of put the time in my earlier years in this industry. So yeah, I couldn't argue for that more for anyone kind of starting out. Like that would be my best advice is just learn, keep learning. And like if it's meant to be and if you really want to continue your career within the industry, like that's going to be the best thing that'll pay off in the long run.
Absolutely, yeah. And is it fair to say that probably starting maybe in some of those larger organizations where they've got, I guess, the right amount of funding to have, strong onboarding and training programs and so forth, that's probably the best place to start as opposed to going straight into a startup where you've got to kind of do it all.
Yeah, so like I'm biased because that's what I did.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I definitely could make that argument. There's a lot that you can learn, especially when you're just getting into the industry. What at a company like RSA where I was, we had products in so many different spaces within the multiple Gartner MQs, and I got to like kind of see and feel that company pride for all those different products and learn a little bit about each of them. But I can't argue that going into the startup world is bad either. So someone on my team, Jordan, she started very early, early days at Cybereason and got to kind of grow her career with the company. So as the company grew, she got to take different roles and different responsibilities. And the beauty of working in a startup is you get to wear many different hats. So
Hmm.
you might be more narrow on the product side or within the industry, but you get to get a flavor of running a company from so many different seats and positions. And especially if the startup is growing, which we all hope they do, you get to be part of that path and seeing how the company changes and culture changes. And, you're hiring hundreds of people at a time. So that's a whole other, level of experience, which, I feel fortunate that I've had the big company experience
Hmm.
and the growing startup experience because they're two different types of lessons to learn there.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think that probably suggests it's very dependent on the person and it's probably very circumstantial. So, depending on the people around you and what opportunities you get, you can absolutely maybe start in that in a smaller startup environment, as long as everyone has the full awareness as to what's required of operating in a startup. But you get to see so many different facets of actual, I think, running a business as well, which is probably what's appealing as well about being in a startup environment. So no, it's interesting, but yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's still where I'm at. So I joined Cato when right after they raised the seed. So it
Yeah.
was super early days. I've been on this journey essentially since day one. And, I'm getting to do things that I've never done before. Like I'm participating in fundraising conversations, partnership, business development, sales. Like there's so many different areas that are needed in the early days of a startup. And anyone who's, got the company name on their lapel has to do it. So that's why I love working at startups. I think it's so much fun. You definitely have to have the right mindset and personality to do it and want to do it and enjoy it.
Yeah.
But I think the opportunities are amazing.
No, no, absolutely. And let's delve into that piece a little bit more so now, in that you are now Chief Marketing Officer, which, amazing. What a thing to be able to kind of say that, say that you've achieved in life, which is great. So tell us a little bit about your experience operating, I guess, as a female at the C-suite level in what is very clearly a very male-dominated industry.
Yeah, yes. You kicked it off saying 24%. I think at the C level it's lower. I don't know the percentage of what it
Yeah.
is. I've definitely noticed it as I've um, taken steps in my career. There's fewer and fewer women at the top, which is unfortunate and
Mhm.
challenging. Um, I think it's challenging, right? Like it's always challenging to be the only woman on a Zoom call or in a boardroom or whatever it might be. I don't think I'll ever get comfortable with it, Like as used to it as I am now, I'm never going to feel like that's right. Like it's not, it's not the right thing. I want to see more women. And I think the most important thing that I can do in the position is to help create change. And
Mhm.
whether that's through what I can do in my world or things like this, where, I can help broadcast that, you know, to people of all different stages of their career, this is yeah, I want to make change, I guess. And that's the most important thing that I can do once I've gotten my seat at the table. And I think, there's a lot that you can talk about with women who want to help women. That's not always
Mhm.
the case that we see. I've certainly come across them in my career where that mindset of, we had to fight so hard to climb the ladder and, win against all the boys. There's only room for me now. Like I completely have seen that. I've been around women like that. I don't want anything to do with that. I think there's room for everybody. And yeah, that's what I want to see change.
Yeah, it's interesting actually that you mentioned that. It's almost like that for some women, which is really unfortunate, is that they see that number, that 24%, and they think, okay, we're not hit, we can't stretch that, but we want to be in it. So therefore, the approach that they take can sometimes not be I guess, the most favorable way of climbing to the top. But I think the important thing is that the idea is that there is room for everyone. So you don't have to be, fighting against your peers. We're all here to kind of help encourage and empower each other, and there is absolutely room for everyone. Um, Going back to that piece where you mentioned about having that kind of seat at the leadership table, and you're used to it, but you don't know if you ever feel entirely kind of comfortable with it. Do you have any particular kind of toolkits that you utilize, whether that's in your, I don't know, in your behaviors or kind of how you pump yourself up before you go in a meeting or whatever it is that helps you navigate being in a meeting where it is predominantly men around you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was probably harder earlier in my career. I remember vividly in a meeting where one of my mentors was in the meeting with me. I There weren't enough seats. Like literally there weren't enough seats at the table.
Oh
And so
wow.
I offered to sit in one of the seats that was kind of behind the table. You know what I'm saying? There were like the seats
Yeah.
on the perimeter of the room, and a couple people had to take a seat in the perimeter. And I was like, oh, I'll grab one of those because I was more junior in my career, and I was just, again, this was during that like learning phase, and I was like, I'll take a little seat on the side. And my mentor afterwards pulled me aside and was like, don't ever do that. Never. Take a seat at the table. You're invited to the meeting. Sit down at the table, talk during the meeting. Everyone wants to hear what you have to say. That's your job. Like, do that. And so ever since then, like that sticks with me, right? It's one of those moments in my career that like gets under my skin still. Like I should have done that. Of course I should have done that. And I don't apologize anymore for things. I mean, I do. That's a lie. I definitely apologize way too much, but for something like that, like if I'm invited to the meeting and my opinion matters, obviously, I'm going to sit at the table. Someone else can sit
Mhm.
on the sidelines. It's not going to be me. So
Yeah.
I need to keep reminding myself of that. It's definitely easier now because, as I say, I'm not used to being the only woman in the room, but I'm very used to hearing my voice. And I think my colleagues can all attest to that. I am not shy about speaking my voice anymore because I've gotten comfortable with that throughout my career. And I think spending the time learning the industry and and getting to the place where I am now, I have confidence in what I know. So I don't struggle with that as much, but yeah, I think it's a matter of telling yourself that you've earned that spot, and don't be shy about it.
I love that story. I feel like, although at the time, obviously, it's not,
Horrible.
it's horrible, but it's clearly there was a really big learning point there, and how amazing it must have been to have had a mentor who was really championing in for you, being your cheerleader in the corner, and being able to teach you actually that you don't need to do that. So it's almost like that was probably a really pivotal point because if he or she
She.
she wasn't there to kind of give you that guidance and that feedback, you might have continued down that path of
Right.
always shying away from having that seat. And actually, I now like trying to think about when I join meetings, I probably sometimes have a similar, you kind of nudge back because you feel as though that you don't want to be in everyone's way, and it's really interesting. So yeah, that resonates actually even in this discussion that we're having right now. So I'm gonna take that as a learn. So you've already helped one person.
We're at
There
the
we go. So you mentioned earlier as well a little bit about imposter syndrome. So is that something that you have dealt with?
Of course. I mean, I
Yeah.
think everyone would be lying if they. That's non-gender specific, I think,
Yeah.
especially I think in our industry because having not having a technical background, I already have it just because I can't code this stuff, you guys. Like I don't know. Um, I'm not a threat researcher. Like I don't know what the bad guys are really doing. You can educate me on it, and I can pretend to sound eloquent about it, but at the end of the day, I work in an industry where I'm not hands on keyboard technically savvy in the same way that the people who are building the product are. Um, so I think that's where a lot of mine comes from. My imposter syndrome is within the industry, not feeling like I know enough. And with how quickly cybersecurity evolves, it's so hard to stay on top of. So there's
Hmm.
always that feeling of there's something I don't know. Oh, well,
Yeah.
there's this other new pocket of cloud security and I'm not up to date on it. And oh my God, there's like three new vendors there and I need to know what they're doing. And oh, the companies are now all buying this solution and that addresses it's like the problems are always changing, the solutions are always changing, literally on a day-to-day basis. So it's a lot to stay on top of, and I definitely feel like there's so much out there that I don't know. But the way that I kind of deal with that is just reminding myself that not everyone has all the answers all the time, and that's okay, you know?
Yeah.
So um, that's the best way that I've learned to cope with it, you know?
Yeah, no, no, it's helpful. I mean, I can even speak as someone who's, a recruiter, sorry, in the field. You do feel that imposter syndrome, when you're on the phone call to someone or you're in a meeting with someone and, you're talking to really senior folk who know their stuff and you think, here I am, and some of the acronyms that they use and what they're talking about, and you're trying to rack your brain to think, "Oh, what does that mean again?" And it kind of knocks your confidence a little bit. And then you tend to shy away from even wanting to speak because you're worried that you're going to sound silly. It's interesting. Um, have you ever dealt with the imposter syndrome when you were kind of, I guess, when you were going for or gearing up to take on a CMO position? Did you ever have a point where you thought, "Am I ready?"
Completely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, with every step in my career, I've thought that, like, oh, I'm not really ready to do more than just product marketing. Like when I took my
Mm.
first general marketing role, I was like, well, I don't know anything about demand gen, guys. Like, you're gonna trust me with this? I don't know anything about PR. I can't do that.
Mm.
Um, so for sure, and there's constant moments that I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. You know, they're all gonna find out. I have no clue. Um, but I think they get balanced out with, successes too. Like, and it's about celebrating the wins that you have and, the accomplishments. And when a project has gone well, or have a really great booth at RSA, which is going to happen next week, right? I think it's worth celebrating those things that go well, and that helps balance out those moments of fear and feeling like you're not enough.
Yeah, I think it's also important to remember is that we're all human. So even though we may be operating as chief marketing officer, chief revenue officer, VP, whatever it may be, is that we're all human. And so as long as we're all susceptible to knowing that you can still learn at whatever point you reach in your career, then that's totally fine to sometimes, still make mistakes or not know something. I think the more humble people can be in certain positions or any positions, but specifically as well when you're a leader, don't be afraid to be like, okay, I've learned something new there. And sometimes you might have reverse mentoring and learn from someone who's maybe much earlier on in their career. It's amazing what we can be open to these days.
Completely. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So, why do you believe then that it's important to diversify leadership teams?
Yeah. So, I mean, as I've said, I've been the only woman at the table far too many times.
Mm,
uh, I think when it comes to decision making and, you know, brainstorming an idea, you want as many different perspectives as you can possibly get. And when you look around the table and you're surrounded by people that all look the same except for you, maybe, or the whole table looks exactly the same, you're going to get one, maybe two perspectives brought to the table. And I think it's super important to make sure that you can get as many different ideas out. And at the end of the day, like it doesn't matter to me the package that it comes in, right? If it's
mm,
male, female, non-binary, like it doesn't matter as long as the person is passionate and has great ideas and wants to participate in the conversation. I think that's by far the most important thing. And the reality is that different, you know, different ideas and different mindsets come from different kinds of people. That's just the
mm.
truth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's important not only to business kind of prosperity and success, but also from a security perspective, I think as well. If you have a different lens on things by inviting different people to have that seat at the table, it may open your eyes to things that you've not not even clocked. And so that's why it's also equally important, I think, to really diversify those leadership teams and kind of have that diversification trickle down into the rest of the business. But it starts with at the top for sure. Like, you know, that's kind of where it needs to stem from, and then make its way down. It's really important.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm hopeful that it's only getting better. I mean, I don't know.
Mm.
I haven't looked at the trends. Um, but I think with things like this, right, and education that's going out to, I think it really starts at the universities, like to high schools even. Education, it's all
Mhm.
about the school system and learning from a young age that there are careers out there like this. Like I grew up not knowing even about tech, that was not my vocabulary when I was in school. So I feel fortunate to have landed here despite not having any awareness of it growing up or even really, in undergraduate. It wasn't something I considered. But hopefully with that change, and it takes time. When you start early on, it's going to take a lot of time to influence the industry. But I'm hopeful that it will be getting better.
Yeah, I think that piece that you mentioned about it stemming from much earlier on in education is very important. I recently joined a podcast, the Didi and Lital show. So Lital, CMO at Hunters, and Didi, the CTO at Ort. And I think they asked me about my first interactions with technology, and I told them a story about when I was at school. I was probably maybe 12, I think, and I just have this very vivid memory of being it was an IT class, we called it IT session. And I had a very militant teacher who I was terrified of asking any questions to. And we'd be at the computers, and I think that we had to make like this light switch or something to do with setting up some tech to be able to make a traffic light go off. No idea what I was doing. And I was terrified to ask the question. And I had an assumption in my mind that it's fine. I didn't really need to ask the question. I didn't need to learn about it because I was never going to end up in tech anyway. So what did it matter? And just kind of got through those classes. But if there had maybe been more awareness and more stress on the importance that actually, do be open minded to this stuff. If you don't understand something, don't be afraid to kind of ask a question and actually learn, because you absolutely can have this as a part of your kind of career in the future. But to be fair, the teacher was a little bit frightening. So that's another thing is I think maybe that's more specific to my own experience, but an experience nonetheless, and something that kind of kept me way away from technology, to the point where I still find myself telling people I'm not technologically savvy, and I almost I feel like I have to like share that with people out of like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing on a computer. And then I realized actually I've just made myself sound really stupid. And it's like, I'm not, I'm not, I can work things. All right. Maybe I don't, don't do it to the same level as everyone else, but stop apologizing for not being technologically savvy or like really know a huge amount about cyber. I need to stop apologizing for it. I'm still learning. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting.
No, you're right. I did it earlier on this call, right? I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, I don't have a tech background. I'm not tech savvy. I did it already. So that one's hard because not growing up in it, not feeling technical is something that is just challenging to overcome. And you're right. It's nothing to apologize for.
Yeah, no, it's true. Well, it sounds like even even you and I are still on this journey then, right now. And I think that's something that I hope provides a little bit of comfort to anyone that's listening to this, is that it's still totally okay to be on that journey of feeling comfortable, but still navigating your career. You don't need to put your career on hold whilst you're learning. It all kind of feeds into one another. So hopefully people can kind of take that from this particular episode as well.
All of my learning has been on the job. All of
Mm,
it. Like
hmm.
everything. From day one when I first, got a job in tech and in cyber, I guess specifically, it's all been on the job. Through the
Yeah,
people that you meet, and it's spending the time whiteboarding out how things work. And yeah, as long as there's a passion for it, you'll learn it on the job. Yeah.
and I guess on that, on the passion piece, what is it that you think kind of keeps you interested and passionate about the cybersecurity space?
I'm stuck in it. No, I'm kidding.
The truth comes out.
Yeah, no, there's definitely days. No, truthfully, I mean, I fell pretty quickly when I first got into cyber. It's the challenge of it. I think that's ultimately why I left finance. If I go back really to the early days, I wanted more of a challenge. I wanted to not have all the answers just right there at my fingertips. No day ever do I have the answers at my fingertips in this industry. So it constantly keeps me on my toes. And then, the other side of it, and, call it silly, I do feel like, we're doing good.
Yeah,
We're doing good work here. Like, there are malicious people out there doing very bad things. And if I can be in my little way helping to protect organizations, governments, whatever it may be, I want to do that little part to help promote the good.
yeah. Interesting words there, little. There you said it's a
Again,
little.
I'm apologizing, right? Here I am. I know. You're
I
right.
don't know. I do it the same. I'm like, oh, here I am. Just I know I'm just a recruiter. It's like, well, no, actually, I'm providing businesses with exceptionally talented people to help stop bad folk. Like whatever way, shape, or form it is, whatever you're a salesperson, marketing, customer success, whatever. I am playing my part. So there you go. Don't say little. There's nothing little about what you're doing at all.
You're right.
But it's clearly ingrained in us. And I guess just lastly, I like to ask everyone if they were to kind of leave, one piece of advice that they've kind of taken in their career, that they think has really, really kind of supported them. What's one thing that you would share, as a kind of final thought?
Hmm. Wow. I think, it goes back to that first story. It's just, speak up. I
Mhm.
think that's been a struggle for me, or was a struggle for a long time, because whenever you have that voice in your head telling you you're not good enough, you don't know the answers, just be quiet. Don't make a fool of yourself. Like, that's a voice that you need to shut down immediately and throw your idea out there. There's no bad ideas. If you have a thought, use your voice and make it be heard.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think as well, if there are individuals listening who perhaps are at a, more established stage in their career, and they witness, like you had, obviously, someone who decided to take a seat further away from the
Yeah.
table, like thank goodness that individual spoke up and kind of gave you the advice. So also for people to not be afraid to share that advice. If you see something, it can really be a turning point for someone. So speak up and share your wisdom with people. It's really important. There is enough room for everyone. We don't need to stick at 24%. So yeah,
Yes.
no. But thank you so much for joining this
Oh,
episode today. It's been really lovely to hear about your story, and I know that you're going to be at RSA next week, and it's going to be great to have the opportunity to connect with you there in person. I'm sure it's going to be pretty hectic. Lots going on, but yeah, no, it's been an absolute delight to kind of connect with you again, and yeah, thank you.
thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to this episode. I hope that you found it inspiring and insightful. I will be releasing each episode of this series on a bi weekly basis, so if you've enjoyed what you've heard, please keep your eyes peeled for the next release. I've loved having you here today and look forward to having you on the next one.